I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's very complicated. That's why I pay 13% of my income in this state every year to people who I assumed were working on things like this. We have a new thing in LA called follow home robberies, where gang members stake out nice restaurants and then follow home the people who leave in expensive cars and force their way into their houses. That's why Paris Hilton now drives a 2009 PT Cruiser and eats at Sbarro.
Bill Maher returns to examine Governor Gavin Newsom, arguing that his leadership plays a central role in California's challenges. He also notes that Mayor Karen Bass faces consequences as these debates unfold. Rather than offering light commentary, Maher questions the policies and messaging critics say have contributed to concern. The discussion is pointed at times, yet it centers on broader questions about governance direction and voter expectations moving forward statewide.
This year, the LA City Council voted that every homeless tent had to be removed from dozens of locations, yet every freeway overpass still looks like history's saddest Coachella. The homeless are both preyed upon and, frankly, a concern that they will do God knows what. You go out for a run in your neighborhood and you have to wonder whether that guy eyeing you on the corner is going to be this guy or this guy.
Maher opens by focusing on the rise in homelessness across Los Angeles and several of California's largest cities. He points to what he views as a contradiction. City councils, including LA's, vote to remove encampments, yet tents continue appearing block after block. He poses a direct question: if the strategies in place are effective, why do the numbers continue increasing? From there, he scrutinizes the approaches associated with Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. Some critics argue that the response has centered heavily on funding announcements and public messaging, while measurable outcomes remain unclear. Significant sums have been directed toward various initiatives, raising ongoing debate about oversight and long-term impact. Maher reflects the frustration of residents who feel caught between empathy for those in need and concern about public order. His broader point is that intentions alone are not enough. Lasting improvement requires transparent leadership, clear accountability, and practical results.
A day doesn't go by where you can't find video of the latest smash and grab robbery, where thieves in broad daylight just smash the front windows of ritzy stores and take all the jewelry they can carry. They went to Jared.
Maher then shifts to concerns about rising crime and retail theft reported in several of California's largest cities. He argues that these issues did not emerge suddenly, suggesting that recent policy adjustments may have contributed to the current debate. In his view, changes intended to reform the justice system have sparked criticism from those who believe public safety should remain the primary focus. He references widely shared incidents of shoplifting and repeat offenses, which have fueled public discussion about enforcement standards and deterrence. Critics contend that reduced penalties may not be producing the intended outcomes, while supporters argue reforms address deeper systemic issues. Maher frames the conversation around accountability, questioning whether policies strike the right balance between fairness and order. His broader takeaway is that compassion and responsibility must work together, or communities risk prolonged instability and declining confidence in leadership.
And when did they legalize shoplifting? There used to be shame in shoplifting, or at least some skill. Now criminals just brazenly walk out of Walgreens, again in broad daylight, with a trash bag full of aisle 3, while the security guard just watches. They have to keep even the most mundane products all caged up. CVS isn't a store, it's a zoo for teeth whitening strips.
Maher traces the debate back to California's move to reclassify certain thefts under $1,000 from felonies to misdemeanors. The stated aim was to reduce prison overcrowding and prioritize more serious offenses. He questions whether the policy achieved its intended goals, arguing that critics believe unintended consequences followed. According to that perspective, some offenders recognized that penalties had changed and adjusted their behavior accordingly, contributing to public concern about retail theft. Widely circulated videos of shoplifting incidents intensified the perception that enforcement had weakened. In response, many stores increased security measures, placing everyday items like toothpaste, detergent, and other essentials behind locked displays. Customers often now must request assistance for routine purchases. Maher frames this as evidence that reform efforts require careful evaluation, emphasizing that public safety and fairness must be balanced to maintain trust in the system.
San Francisco in the last few years has seen 11 Walgreens and 6 CVS stores just give up and close because that town seems simply beyond law, which is heartbreaking because I, like so many people, love that city, and I don't think it's corny to admit, yes, I left my heart in San Francisco. Also my wallet and iPhone.
Maher also expands the discussion beyond homelessness, focusing on public safety concerns that many Californians raise, particularly involving vehicle theft and property crime. He describes a situation that feels familiar to some residents, stepping away briefly only to return and find belongings missing. He argues that incidents like auto break-ins have become a visible source of frustration in certain urban areas. Reports have shown high numbers of vehicle thefts in Los Angeles in recent years, while San Francisco has faced ongoing scrutiny over property crime trends, even as some data suggests fluctuations over time. These statistics, he suggests, contribute to a broader sense of unease among residents. Maher presents these figures to underline the perception that communities feel caught between rising concerns about crime and uncertainty over how effectively leadership is responding. His argument centers on the need for clear strategies that restore confidence and address public safety without oversimplifying complex challenges.
Bay Area citizens have been complaining in recent years about all the human feces in the streets, but now the streets are full of something else. They call it San Francisco snow. It's glass, piles and piles of shattered glass everywhere from car windows being smashed. It's so routine to have this happen to any parked car that people purposefully leave the windows down and the glove compartment open so thieves can see there's nothing of value. Or they leave a note on the car politely assuring the thief that there's nothing worth stealing and please don't break the windows. Dear Mr. Criminal, I hope this note finds you well.
Maher argues that in parts of the Bay Area, some residents have taken unusual precautions, such as leaving notes inside their cars stating there is nothing valuable to steal, hoping to avoid broken windows. He frames this not as clever adaptation, but as a visible sign of frustration. In his view, when individuals feel compelled to adjust their behavior in response to crime, it reflects deeper concerns about public safety. He describes reports of drivers even leaving windows slightly open to discourage damage, a choice he interprets as exhaustion rather than carelessness. For critics, these actions symbolize a sense that ordinary citizens are bearing the cost of policies they did not directly shape. Maher contends that when governance appears disconnected from everyday experiences, public trust can erode. As confidence declines, people look for personal workarounds, reinforcing the perception that institutions must respond more effectively to restore stability and accountability.
What is so disturbing here is not just that there's more crime and mayhem, it's the audacity of it all. Like there's no lines anymore that can't be crossed.
Maher cautions that California could be approaching a critical moment where some residents perceive that boundaries are unclear and enforcement lacks consistency. He suggests that when rules appear unevenly applied, public behavior can gradually shift. Actions that once drew strong reactions may begin to seem routine, sometimes even unfolding openly and shared widely online. For many law-abiding residents, he argues, this perception fuels frustration. They contribute through taxes, comply with regulations, and expect stability, yet may feel burdened by disruptions tied to broader policy debates. At the same time, critics contend that inconsistent accountability can create the impression that violations carry limited consequences. Maher frames the issue less as a reflection on individual character and more as a question of governance. In his view, when enforcement standards appear uncertain, confidence in institutions weakens, and rebuilding trust later can prove more difficult than addressing concerns early.
It's also, yes, undeniably true that LA is built in a stupid place to build a city. But when it's not on fire, it's really quite lovely. And it's my home. And stupid as its origin may be, it's not going anywhere. Axios ran a story on how getting the water out of the hydrants in Pacific Palisades was more complicated than it seems. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's very complicated. That's why I pay 13% of my income in this state every year to people who I assumed were working on things like this.
Maher also questions what he views as a disconnect between California's high tax burden and the public services residents expect in return. He notes that the state ranks among the highest in overall taxation, yet argues that many constituents feel results do not always match the scale of revenue collected. In his telling, essential services should operate efficiently when funding is substantial, but critics contend performance has been inconsistent. He highlights recurring wildfire seasons as a prominent example. Each year, destructive fires impact heavily populated and widely cherished regions, prompting renewed scrutiny of preparedness and response efforts. Some observers argue that prevention strategies and infrastructure investments have not kept pace with the risks. Maher frames this not simply as a natural disaster issue, but as a broader governance challenge. He asks whether resource allocation and long-term planning are meeting expectations, especially when taxpayers expect reliability during moments of crisis.
When asked why so many of the hydrants in the Palisades ran out of water, Governor Newsom said the local folks are trying to figure that out. Yeah, you got to do that before the fire. At least in the Palisades, the hydrants were still there. 300 other ones around the city are just gone, stolen for parts. One of the 3 reservoirs for the Palisades was offline at the one time of year when it was most needed. LA's Mayor Karen Bass, the Nero of American politics, was fiddling in Ghana while the city burned and later placed the blame on 8 months of negligible rain and winds that have not been seen in LA in at least 14 years. Yeah, that's not that long a time. Maybe look in the history books to see how our ancestors handled it back in 2011.
What most frustrates Maher, and many residents he references, is the repeated wildfire devastation that strikes communities year after year. Homes are destroyed, livelihoods disrupted, and entire neighborhoods reshaped. He argues that with each season, voters expect leaders such as Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass to apply lessons learned and strengthen prevention efforts in meaningful ways. Instead, he suggests the cycle often feels familiar: early warnings, questions about preparedness, and detailed explanations delivered after significant damage has already occurred. His criticism centers less on natural forces and more on governance, including debates over forest management, controlled burns, and infrastructure upgrades. These topics resurface every season, yet many residents question whether enough changes occur before the next emergency. Maher contends that if another major fire were to ignite, public confidence would hinge on whether the response shows measurable improvement. For many Californians, repeated crises feel financially and emotionally draining. Broadening his critique, he points to concerns in Los Angeles and the Bay Area, where issues like homelessness, property crime, and public safety continue to generate debate. He argues that while policies may be well-intentioned, outcomes often fall short of expectations. Retailers increase security, residents adjust daily habits, and frustration grows over whether reforms balance compassion with accountability. He concludes that Californians contribute significant tax revenue and expect effective protection and services in return. His commentary reflects visible public dissatisfaction, delivered in a direct tone that challenges leadership to address complex problems with clearer results. That wraps up today's discussion. If you found it informative, consider liking the video and subscribing for future updates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.